The sun had barely touched the horizon when Mama Obioma's feet hit the dusty ground outside her compound. While other women stretched and yawned in their beds, she was already halfway down the village path, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her headscarf knotted with urgency. Her husband, Papa Obioma, a quiet man who preferred his morning tea in silence, watched her disappear into the morning mist without a word. He had long stopped asking where she was going. The answer was always the same, everywhere and nowhere, chasing whispers like a hunter chasing shadows. Mama Obioma had a gift, or so she believed. She could hear a cough 3 compounds away and know who was sick. She could spot a new wrapper on a woman's waist and trace it back to a secret lover. Her ears were sharper than a bat's, and her legs never tired. She moved through Amakum like wine through dry leaves, invisible but always present, always listening, always ready to carry what she had to the next willing ear. But Mama Obioma did not just listen, she reshaped what she heard. A simple complaint became a conspiracy. A moment of frustration became evidence of betrayal. And once her mouth opened, the damage was done. Her first victim was her own daughter-in-law, Adiz, a gentle woman married to her son Obioma. One evening, Mama Obioma pressed her ear against the wooden window of their small house and heard Adiz sigh heavily. "I wish she would give us some space," Adiz whispered to her husband. "Just a little peace, that's all I ask." That was all Mama Obioma needed. By sunrise, she was at the market, leaning close to the yam sellers, her voice low and dramatic. "My son's wife wants to poison me," she said, eyes wide with false fear. She said it herself, "She wants me gone so she can have the house to herself." The women gasped, covering their mouths in shock. By noon, the story had grown. By evening, Adiz was branded a witch, a murderer in waiting. Her marriage crumbled within days, and Mama Obioma watched it all unfold with a twisted smile, already planning her next move. Adiz stood at the edge of the village square, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she tried to explain herself to the gathering crowd. But no one would listen. The women turned their backs, whispering among themselves, glancing at her with suspicion and disgust. Her husband, Obioma, stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his face hard and unreadable. He had heard the rumors too. At first, he dismissed them, laughing at how ridiculous they sounded. But then his mother came to him privately, tears streaming down her face, begging him to protect himself. "She said she wants me dead," Mama Obioma had whispered, clutching his arm. "I heard her with my own ears. Please, my son, don't let her destroy this family." Obioma's love for his wife began to crack under the weight of his mother's words. And when Adiz denied everything, he saw her silence as guilt. Within a week, she was gone, sent back to her father's village in shame, her name dragged through the mud like a dog's carcass. Mama Obioma did not attend Adiz's departure. She stayed in her compound, humming softly as she pounded yam, her mind already wandering to the next household. There was Chokuma's house, just down the path. His wife, Neoma, had been seen laughing with a male friend near the stream. It was innocent enough, a childhood friend visiting from another village. But in Mama Obioma's hands, innocence was just raw material waiting to be molded into scandal. She began her work slowly, carefully. A comment here, a question there. "I saw Neoma with a strange man yesterday," she said to a neighbor, her tone dripping with false concern. "I hope everything is alright at home." The neighbor's eyes widened. "A strange man? Are you sure?" Mama Obioma nodded gravely. "I didn't want to say anything, but yes. They were very close. Too close." By the time the rumor reached Chokuma, the story had transformed. Neoma was no longer talking to a friend, she was hiding a secret lover. Some said she had children with him in another village. Others claimed she was planning to run away. Chokuma, a proud man with a quick temper, confronted his wife in front of the entire compound. Neoma wept, begging him to believe her, but his trust had already been poisoned. That night, he locked her out of the house, and she slept under the mango tree, her cries echoing through the village while Mama Obioma smiled from her window. The Amakum market was the heart of the village, a place where news traveled faster than the wind. Every morning, traders set up their stalls under the big iroko tree, spreading out yams, palm oil, dried fish, and woven baskets. Women gathered not just to buy and sell, but to talk, to share, to connect. And in the center of it all, like a spider in her web, sat Mama Obioma. She never sold anything. She never bought much either. But she was always there, moving from stall to stall, her ears open, her tongue ready. The other women welcomed her at first. She seemed friendly, always interested in their lives, always asking questions. "How is your husband?" she would ask sweetly. "Is he still working on that new farm?" And when the woman answered, Mama Obioma would nod thoughtfully, storing the information like grain in a barn, ready to use when the time was right. One day, a young woman named Ego arrived at the market wearing a beautiful new wrapper. It was bright and expensive, the kind only wealthy women could afford. The other traders noticed immediately, whispering among themselves. Where did she get the money? Her husband was just a palm wine tapper, he could never afford something like that. Mama Obioma saw the opportunity and pounced. She approached Ego with a warm smile, complimenting her outfit, asking where she bought it. Ego, flattered and unsuspecting, mentioned that a distant uncle had sent her money as a gift. But Mama Obioma's version was different. By the time she finished her rounds, the story had changed. Ego's uncle became a secret lover. The gift became payment for shameful acts. And by sunset, Ego's reputation was in ruins. Her husband heard the rumors and came to the market in a rage, dragging her home by the arm while the crowd watched in silence. Mama Obioma stood at the edge of the crowd, her face expressionless, but inside, she felt a thrill. This was her power. This was her kingdom. And she had no intention of stopping. Igwe Bayora, the village chief, was a man of great patience. He had ruled Amakum for over 20 years, settling disputes, guiding the youth, and maintaining peace among the families. His compound was large and well kept, a symbol of order and respect. But lately, the chief had been troubled. More and more people were coming to him with complaints, husbands accusing wives, neighbors turning on each other, families breaking apart over rumors that seemed to come from nowhere. At first, he tried to resolve each case individually, listening carefully, asking questions, trying to find the truth. But the truth was slippery. Every story contradicted the next. Every accuser had a different version. And no one could agree on how the rumor started. It was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of hearings, Igwe Bayora sat under the big Udola tree in his compound, his head in his hands. His eldest son, Okoro, approached quietly and sat beside him. "Father," Okoro said gently, "the village is falling apart. Something must be done." The chief nodded slowly. "I know, my son. But how do you fight an enemy you cannot see? These rumors, they are like poison in the water. By the time you notice, everyone has already drunk." Okoro hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Father, there is a name that keeps appearing in these stories. Not as the victim, but as the one who carries the tale. Mama Obioma." The chief's eyes narrowed. He had heard the name before, whispered in passing, never directly accused. But now, hearing it spoken clearly, he felt a chill run through him. Could one woman really be responsible for all this chaos? And if so, what could be done? She had broken no law. She had stolen nothing. All she had done was talk. But her words had destroyed more lives than any thief or criminal ever could. The day Chukwuma's mother arrived at the village square, the entire community knew something terrible had happened. She was an old woman, frail and slow-moving, but that morning she walked with the fury of a warrior. Her eyes were red, her voice sharp as broken glass. She had come from a neighboring village after hearing what had happened to her son's marriage. Neoma, her daughter-in-law, had been sent away in disgrace, accused of adultery based on nothing but rumors. The old woman stood in the center of the square and pointed directly at Mama Obioma, who was sitting under her usual spot by the iroko tree. "You," the old woman shouted, her voice echoing across the market. "You are a destroyer of homes. You are a thief of peace. You sit here every day with your lies, and you think no one will hold you accountable." The crowd fell silent. Mama Obioma's face remained calm, but her hands tightened around the edge of her wrapper. She opened her mouth to respond, but the old woman cut her off. "My son's wife did nothing wrong. She was faithful, she was kind, and you destroyed her with your wicked tongue. You will answer for this, if not to me, then to the gods." The confrontation shook the village. For the first time, someone had publicly challenged Mama Obioma. And for the first time, people began to question the stories they had believed so easily. Whispers spread through the market, not about scandals this time, but about Mama Obioma herself. How many marriages had she ruined? How many friendships had she shattered? How many innocent people had suffered because of her? The weight of these questions hung heavy in the air, and even Mama Obioma, for all her confidence, felt the shift. She left the market early that day, walking home in silence, her head held high but her heart uneasy. She told herself she had done nothing wrong. She was only repeating what she heard. But deep down, in a place she refused to look, she knew the truth. She had become the very thing the village feared most, a force of destruction that no one could control. After the old woman's public accusation, something strange began to happen in Amakum. The women at the market, who had once welcomed Mama Obioma with smiles and eager ears, now turned away when she approached. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes shifted. The warm greetings she once received were replaced with cold nods or complete silence. At first, Mama Obioma laughed it off. She told herself they were jealous, threatened by her knowledge and influence. But as days passed, the isolation grew heavier. She would sit under the iroko tree, alone, watching the other women gather in groups, laughing and talking as if she no longer existed. It stung more than she expected. For all her power, she had never realized how much she depended on their attention. Without it, she felt invisible. And for a woman who thrived on being at the center of everything, invisibility was a slow, suffocating death. One afternoon, she tried to insert herself into a conversation between two traders. "Did you hear about Nkem's daughter?" she began, her voice bright with false innocence. But before she could finish, one of the women raised her hand sharply. "Mama Obioma, please. We are tired." The words hung in the air like a slap. The other woman nodded. "We don't want any more trouble. Just leave us alone." Mama Obioma's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stood there, stunned, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and something she didn't want to name, shame. She turned and walked away, her legs heavy, her head spinning. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her own actions. But instead of reflecting, instead of stopping, she felt a new emotion rising inside her, rage. If they thought they could silence her, they were wrong. If they thought she would simply disappear, they were mistaken. She would show them. She would remind them why her voice mattered. And this time, she would not hold back. Mama Obioma's rage simmered for days, and then it exploded in the most devastating way. She had always been careful with her lies, targeting individuals, weaving stories that were just believable enough to spread. But now, with her pride wounded and her power threatened, she decided to go bigger. She would create a rumor so large, so scandalous, that the entire village would have no choice but to pay attention. And the perfect target presented itself one quiet evening when she saw Egui Bayora's youngest son, Chidi, returning from the forest with a basket of herbs. Chidi was a healer in training, learning the old ways from the village herbalist. He spent long hours in the forest, gathering roots and leaves, studying their properties. But to Mama Obioma, his solitary trips were suspicious. Why would a young man spend so much time alone in the forest? What was he hiding? She didn't have proof, didn't have witnesses. But she didn't need them. She had her imagination. And that was enough. The next morning, Mama Obioma went to the market earlier than usual. She found a group of older women preparing their stalls and approached them with a grave expression. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice trembling with forced urgency. "But you must promise not to tell anyone." The women leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Mama Obioma glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then spoke in a low, dramatic tone. "I saw Chidi, the chief's son, in the forest last night. He was performing rituals. Dark rituals. I think he's trying to become a sorcerer." The women gasped, their eyes wide with shock. "Are you sure?" one of them asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Obioma nodded solemnly. "I saw it with my own eyes. Candles, blood, strange markings on the trees. He's been going there every night. And now I understand why the village has been cursed with so much trouble. It's him. He's the one bringing darkness to Amakum." The rumor spread like wildfire. By midday, everyone had heard. By evening, the chief himself had been informed. And as the sun set over the village, a crowd began to gather outside Egui Bayora's compound, demanding answers, demanding justice. Mama Obioma watched from a distance, her heart pounding with a twisted sense of triumph. She had done it. She had reminded them all who held the real power in this village. Egui Bayora stood at the entrance of his compound, facing the angry crowd that had gathered outside. Their voices rose in a chaotic chorus, accusing his son, demanding that he be punished, some even calling for him to be banished. The chief raised his hand, trying to calm them, but the noise only grew louder. His heart pounded in his chest, a sharp pain spreading through his left arm. He tried to speak, to defend his son, to ask for calm, but his voice came out weak, strained. And then, without warning, his knees buckled. The crowd gasped as Egui Bayora collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest, his face twisted in pain. His sons rushed to his side, lifting him carefully, calling for the herbalist, for anyone who could help. The crowd, suddenly silent, watched in shock as the man who had held their village together for decades lay helpless on the ground, the weight of their accusations and anger pressing down on him like a heavy stone. Inside the chief's compound, the herbalist walked quickly, pressing cool herbs against the chief's forehead, administering bitter potions, whispering prayers to the ancestors. Chidi, the accused son, knelt beside his father, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't do anything," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was only gathering herbs. I was only trying to help." But the damage was done. The rumor had taken root, and even the chief's authority could not uproot it. As the night deepened, word spread through the village that Egui Bayora's condition was serious. Some said it was a heart attack brought on by stress. Others whispered that it was a curse, punishment for his son's dark practices. And in the shadows, Mama Obioma sat in her compound, her hands trembling slightly as she realized the full scope of what she had done. For the first time, she felt something close to fear. She had pushed too far. She had crossed the line. And now, the consequences were beginning to spiral beyond her control. The next morning, Amakum was a village on the edge of collapse. Families that had lived side by side for generations now refused to speak to each other. Friends became enemies. Neighbors built fences where none had existed before. The market, once bustling with life and laughter, was now a place of cold transactions and suspicious glances. Trust, the invisible thread that had held the community together, had been completely severed. And at the center of it all, like a spider that had destroyed its own web, sat Mama Obioma. She no longer went to the market. She no longer wandered from compound to compound. She stayed inside her house, the silence around her heavy and oppressive. Her husband, Papa Obioma, said nothing. He had long stopped trying to reason with her. He simply sat outside, smoking his pipe, his eyes distant, as if he no longer recognized the woman he had married. Meanwhile, a small group of villagers had begun to gather in secret. Led by Chokuma, whose marriage Mama Obioma had destroyed, and joined by others who had lost loved ones to her lies, they met under the cover of darkness to discuss what should be done. "We cannot let this continue," Chokuma said, his voice firm. "She has torn apart our village. She has destroyed families. And now, even the chief is suffering because of her." Another man, whose daughter had been falsely accused of theft, nodded in agreement. "But what can we do? She has broken no law. She has stolen nothing. All she has done is talk." A woman spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "Then we must make her face the truth. We must make her see what she has done. And we must make sure the entire village sees it too." The group agreed. They would confront Mama Obioma, not with anger, but with the weight of every lie she had told, every life she had ruined. They would gather the evidence, the testimonies, the broken families, and they would present it all before the entire village. And this time, there would be no escape. The truth, long buried under layers of gossip and deceit, would finally come to light. The day of reckoning arrived on a Sunday, when the entire village gathered under the big Iroko tree for a community meeting. It was a rare occasion, called only in times of great crisis. Igwe Bayora, though still weak, insisted on being present. He was carried on a wooden chair by his sons and placed at the center of the gathering. The crowd was silent, tense, waiting. And then, one by one, people began to step forward. Adis, the first victim, spoke with a voice that shook with emotion. She told her story, how a simple, private conversation had been twisted into a deadly accusation, how her marriage had been destroyed, how she had been exiled from her home. Others followed. Neoma, Igo, the mother of the falsely accused daughter, and many more. Each one shared their pain, their loss, their truth. And with each testimony, the weight in the air grew heavier, pressing down on everyone present, but especially on one woman. Mama Obioma sat at the edge of the crowd, her head bowed, her hands trembling in her lap. She had tried to stay home, tried to hide, but her husband had insisted she come. "You must face what you have done," he had said, his voice quiet but firm. And now, as she listened to the voices of those she had wronged, something inside her began to crack. The pride, the justification, the denial, it all crumbled. And in its place, a painful, undeniable truth emerged: she had become a monster. When the testimonies ended, Igwe Bayora spoke. His voice was weak, but his words carried the weight of authority and sorrow. "Mama Obioma," he said, looking directly at her. "You have used your tongue as a weapon. You have destroyed what we have spent generations building. And now, this village must decide what to do with you." The crowd murmured, some calling for punishment, others for forgiveness. But before anyone could speak further, Mama Obioma stood. Her legs shook, her voice barely audible, but she spoke. "I am guilty," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I am guilty of everything you have said. I was selfish. I was cruel. I wanted attention, and I did not care who I had to get it. I am sorry." I know that word means nothing now. But I am sorry. The village fell silent. Some wept. Others looked away. And as the sun set over Amakum, the long process of healing began, not with punishment, but with acknowledgement, with truth, and with the slow, painful work of rebuilding what had been broken.